If you're trying to conceive and feeling overwhelmed with fertility advice, then this podcast is for you. Welcome to Don't Tell Me to Relax, your fertility podcast and antidote to unhelpful fertility information. I'm Hannah, a fertility acupuncturist, teacher and campaigner for better fertility education. This podcast aims to empower and inform you about your menstrual cycle and fertility. It's basically all that information you didn't get in sex ed at school, with the aim of improving your understanding of your reproductive health and optimizing your fertility. This is our first episode in our Men in May mini-series. As well as focusing in on men in the podcast, we have 2 live Q&As in our Facebook community group this month. We have a live Q&A on nutrition with Kirsty Harrison, and we have one with Claire, who you're going to hear from next. If you'd like to join us or watch the playback, the details are at the end of the show notes. And if you'd like to ask a question, please email me hello@hannahpern.com. Let's get stuck in. I am joined by the lovely, formidable Claire Mooney from Fertility Solutions. Claire is a consultant embryologist with over 24 years experience. She has set up a company called Fertility Solutions to provide better testing, investigations and treatments to improve male fertility and improve the chances of a natural conception. And if you do end up going for IUI or IVF, then you're in a much better place. And Claire she's a friend of the show now because she's come on. This is her second appearance because her first one went down so well. So thank you, Claire, and welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me back, Hannah. It's very, very kind of you. And I've been looking forward to this. We've just been having a chat beforehand about how much I've been looking forward to this. So yes, thank you for having me back. Let's talk all things sperm, my favourite subject.
So today we're going to be looking at how to have healthy sperm and like what we can do, what people can do from a lifestyle perspective to look after their sperm and improve their sperm. And I guess the good place to start is that, you know, we in our clinic, we spend a lot of time looking at a woman's menstrual cycle, because from a menstrual cycle, we pick up signs and clues that suggest there might be issues, there might be problems that we want to investigate. And I feel like for male sperm, it's a bit harder to really look for signs and symptoms, but there are some there. There are red flags that we can ask about. Can you tell us a little bit more about what they might be?
Well, I'm going to start off with the obvious one. You're not getting pregnant and your partner's being told everything's fine. The scans are fine with her and all of your blood test results are fine and her fallopian tubes are okay. I think that so many of the couples that I'm very lucky to speak to assume still that this is all predominantly a female issue. So by the time we get to speak to the man, a lot of the couples are quite surprised almost that this could be a male factor, but it can be. Half of all people that try to conceive that can't or struggle over the course of more than a year have a significant male factor, nothing to do with the girls at all. So the first indication might be just not getting pregnant. In terms of your sort of physical health, we do know that if you have painful cysts or painful areas of your testicles, so if you're sitting down and things feel uncomfortable, you're walking around and you can feel pain, throbbing, whether it's a deep ache or something sort of more sharp, that is something that can be related to fertility. That can be related to varicocele, which is an enlarged vein in the testicle, which will significantly affect sperm quality. So it can be a varicocele, it can be a cyst. Obviously, chaps, if you feel any lumps in your testicles, straight to the GP. Most people do not have testicular cancer, but we have to take that very seriously. So if you're feeling yourself down there, which you should do, and there are lots of good programs to show you exactly how to feel your testicles to check them. If you feel any lumps or bumps, it's straight to the GP for an ultrasound scan. So lumps and bumps on the testicles, sometimes also painful urination. That can be associated with infection in semen, infection in the bladder. So if you're having difficulty and you're peeing more often than you normally would, and it's hurting when you do pee, then that can be something that can be related to fertility as well. Smaller testicles, although you won't obviously know that necessarily because, your testicles are your testicles. But we do know that men with smaller testicles can sometimes have significant problems. And obviously, I appreciate that you won't be walking around the gym, boys, comparing testicles. Although I did have a patient say that to me yesterday. Oh, I knew my testicles were slightly small because I said, "Oh, that's all right. It's good to be testing yourself." So, also, if you have a bit of a history of this as well, so if you had mumps as a child, ask your mum and dad if that was the case. If you've ever had any urological issues, so undescended testicles, anything that you know from a sort of a history. So maybe as a child you might have had an operation to bring your testicles down to the right orientation. That can sometimes, for some men, leave you with fertility problems because of the way that the testicles were formed and sort of were presented when you were born and when you were a young child. So those things can be significant. There are obvious things that I would like to actually address, Hannah, which come up a lot with me. I do speak to a lot of young men and otherwise that are bodybuilding in the gym and busy pumping iron and for the perfect body beautiful, and at the same time taking things that the other men might have said, "Oh, here we go, just take this testosterone or steroid." It's usually a tablet or an injection. No doctor would, of course, prescribed it for you in an effort to build up your muscle mass and obviously make you more bulky. But what we do know is that there's a lot of misconception because then your friend in the gym will say, well, it's okay. It might affect your sperm a bit, but here's some HCG and HSG. Just take it and all will be well. Well, I can tell you now, unfortunately, listeners, all will not be well because a lot of men come to see me that are on these cycles where they're injecting steroids or testosterone, and then they're taking this HCG and HSG and HCG. I can tell you now that it will not counter effect the effects of testosterone or steroids, because what
Mm.
happens is the steroids mimic your body's testosterone, and the testosterone obviously does that as well. It actually feeds back to your pituitary gland in your brain, telling your brain not to make any more sperm because we've got enough down here. And then what happens is that you stop making sperm. Well, you can think to yourself, well, that's all right. I'll just stop the testosterone and the steroids, and we'll leave it for 3 months, and then we'll have a baby. Well, I'm afraid to say you can actually cause a permanent damage to your testicles. You can cause them to atrophify, shrivel up a little bit, and not be able to be restarted. So I would absolutely say that you avoid steroids. Do not take steroids. Do not take testosterone replacement therapies. They will, and they certainly do lead to sterility and infertility as well. So if you're taking that, you may want to test your fertility, or you may want to have a conversation with me or your endocrinologist or your GP, so you can actually ascertain how we can help you to wean off of that, and maybe find other ways of improving your muscle mass that don't involve that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So yes, I mean, I think that's how you might know that something's wrong. But ultimately, Hannah, I don't think. I mean, I do get a lot of gentlemen that come to see me about their about their ejaculate consistency. So there's a lot
Mm.
on the internet to say that white semen is better and this kind of semen is better. Well, I actually see all kinds of consistency of semen. So I know that a lot of chaps have ejaculated into a jar, for example, held it up. Does that look okay? Well, a lot of times that can be quite I suppose artificially reassuring, because actually white blood cells cause your semen to look white as well. So you can have an ejaculate that is full of white blood cells and no sperm at all, where you've seen it beautifully white. So the best thing to do is not to sit at home worrying or getting yourself upset. Get yourself tested. Get yourself
Yeah.
tested, and then you'll know categorically if you've got a problem or you haven't, which hopefully you haven't.
And when it comes to testing, I had a consultation with somebody the other day who was about to start IVF, and they had unexplained infertility. They'd been trying for 2 years, and he had had one sperm analysis, and that was it. That was the only kind of test that had been done on him, and they were sort of readying up to go for IVF. So what is one sperm test enough to kind of give people information about what is happening? I know what the answer is going to be, but can you explain about why it's a no?
Well, that's a no from me, Hannah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's like us saying, is it okay to give a woman one blood test and then say to them, "You need IVF"? Is it okay to give a heart patient one listen of the heart and say, "Transplant, you need a transplant"? So, no, it's not appropriate or adequate because IVF treatment, and that is my background. My background was embryology for 15 years, so I've done all of that, done all the ICSI, done all the IVF. And I'm afraid to say that it just doesn't work for a lot of people anyway. So for 1 in every 3 people, it works. I mean, 1 in every 4, 1 in every 3, but for the other 3 and 4 or 2 and 3, depending on which clinic you're at, it doesn't work. So
Mm,
the answer really is to try and work out what the problem is in the beginning. So let's assume that every test has been done to your partner. She's being told she's got a great ovarian reserve, fallopian tubes that are clear, lovely uterus, everything looks beautiful, and you've had one semen analysis. I have to say, and this is a statistic that might shock people, that up to 20% of men with a normal semen analysis are infertile. 20%. It's a well known statistic. And yet, so many men are told that everything is normozoospermic, so normal for number of sperm and how they're swimming and what the shape they are. And yet, we know that they're not normal at the genetic level, or they've got plenty of bugs in the semen that's causing problems. So, what test should you have before IVF? Do you know, it's actually quite simple, I feel. I feel that you should have an analysis, comprehensive analysis carried out to WHO criteria by an experienced andrologist, hopefully in an accredited clinic. And then a semen culture or microbiome, which is a bit more of an advanced sperm of a bug test to make sure there's no pathogens or white blood cells or any sort of bacteria in the sample. And then my good old friend DNA fragmentation testing, which I'm ashamed to say actually, when it first came out 10 years ago, I thought, oh, it doesn't sound like it's going to be anything. But of course, it's logical. The most fundamental part of anybody's sperm is the DNA. You're trying to get a sperm which has got the DNA in the head up through the woman's body to the woman's egg, fertilize that egg, and make an embryo which implants and makes a baby. And the most fundamental part of the sperm is the genetics. It's completely a no brainer. Having these 3 tests done, yes, it's expensive. Well, it is expensive because the NHS don't do 2 of them, but it's
mm,
such a good insurance policy to be able to say, look, I'm only going to get probably 1 cycle funded by the IVF, by the NHS anyway. So if I'm going to get 1 cycle funded, isn't it logical at that stage to have 3 tests done that can just say it's not likely to be sperm? And for me, I mean, I just wish that the NHS would do it, Hannah, because then people wouldn't have to pay for it. But it's a
mm,
really good way of saying it's not, it is maybe my partner or it isn't, of course. And then
yeah.
if you have a normal semen analysis and normal everything for the man, and then everything's normal with the woman, I would then say that that will give your IVF clinic or your clinic a lot more information to go on to think, well, hang on a minute. So, what's the problem here? What's the issue? So they can apply the right answers with the fertility treatment to help you have a baby. So, maybe that's, well, if maybe the egg and sperm is getting together and fertilizing, but maybe it's not developing on that it can actually create a baby and implant, in which case your IVF clinic can think to itself, well, maybe we should do genetic analysis of the
Mm,
embryos, check that they're normal. So, or maybe we should check the karyotype of the man and the woman to make sure that you have a normal amount of chromosomes in your cells and that's not affecting things. I just feel if these 3 tests can be done on one ejaculate, and all the results can be back within 3 weeks, it's such a good way of saying, I don't think this is a male factor. I think this is more likely to be egg and sperm meeting. And then if they are meeting and not able to implant, an implantation issue. And then we can really start to work out why people are not conceiving. Rather than saying, let's just shut our eyes and put eggs and sperm in a dish, take out the embryos and put them in a uterus. Now, in a lot of ways, you could ask yourself for people with non tubal factors, so when their fallopian tubes are clear, you could ask yourself, well, why hasn't that worked in nature over the course of maybe 1 to 2 years? I mean, our ovaries are not connected to our fallopian tubes, so we're not very well designed. The egg sometimes just heads straight out into the abdominal cavity. But overall, we just need to understand after 24 months of periods and cycles and intercourse, statistically, 90 plus percent of patients are pregnant if there is no problem somewhere else. So you have to then think to yourself, well, where is the problem elsewhere? Is it a
Mm.
vaginal microbiome? Is it bugs in the woman's body? Is it bugs in the man's body? It's logical to just do really good, thorough diagnostics from the very beginning, from the very
Mm.
beginning to understand that. So no, not one test. 3, and also a good conversation about sort of how you can make that sperm even better, which might bring us
Yeah.
on nicely to that right now.
Well, before we move on to that, one thing that I know lots of people listening to this will have been told, because I hear it weekly, daily, sometimes in clinic, is that when people ask about doing a DNA fragmentation test,
Yeah.
they are often told, don't bother. It's a waste of money because we are going to take the sperm, we're going to look at the sperm, and we're going to take the best looking sperm and we're going to put it into the egg anyway via ICSI. So that is the treatment for DNA problems. So why would you test? Because what are you going to do with that information? And I cannot tell you how many people have been told that in the clinic, and then they feel a bit like, well, what shall I do now? My consultant, my clinic have said it's a waste of money, don't do it, or if you want to do
Sure.
it, you can go and do it privately. Like, what can you say to those people?
Well, I think things are changing, but I would say to those people that I am an embryologist. I was and I am. I've done many, many ICSI procedures in my lifetime where I've injected sperm into eggs, and at no point could I ever choose a sperm based on its genetic health. I've never been able to do it. You can't do it now. There are lots of variations of looking at sperm. There's IMSI, where you can look at it from a very high magnification. There's PIXI, where you can use other sort of chemicals to attract the sperm over. But ultimately, you can't select a sperm based on its genetic normality. The important thing to do if you are having to have fertility treatment or ICSI procedures actually is to make sure that the sperm quality is as good as it possibly can be. And by doing that, the way that you do that is A, make sure that you know what the baseline is. So is the sperm normal genetically or not? If there's a problem, then you go and see a urologist in the same way as a woman goes to see a gynecologist, because the urologist then will try and work out why the sperm has got high fragmentation or bugs in the sperm or problems with the head shapes of the sperm, improve it, treat the man. And so if you do need to go for another IVF cycle, the sperm that the embryologist has to choose from is far more healthy. And I have to say that, a lot of the clinics are now sort of coming around better to that. And interestingly, they are the clinics with the highest pregnancy rates,
Mm.
because you cannot only consider one half of the puzzle. It's not logical. A baby, you and I are made from our mum and our dad. Our mum had the eggs, our dad had our sperm, although it's variations of that these days, which obviously I help, we help everybody in any situation. So what we know fundamentally is that it took that egg and that sperm to make an embryo and to make a human being. We know that. And so the egg DNA is important and the sperm DNA is important. And rather than the egg DNA that you can't do anything about,
Mm.
unfortunately, we're born with all of our eggs, us girls. So once once we're 35, they're 35. Once we're 40, they're 40. Can't change that. We can change the man's sperm. We can improve it. We can change it. We can lower the fragmentation. We can get rid of the bugs. We can do so much for the man, so much that then IVF treatment becomes more successful. And I would like to see every single couple that's been trying for more than a year, well, actually, we'll get on to that in a minute. Trying for more than 6 months, I actually feel in a lot of situations, just have a comprehensive assessment of the man's fertility from the very beginning. So all the results come in, the urology team reviews them based on his clinical history as well. We take a clinical history and then we decide, is this a male factor or is this not a male factor? And it is yes
Mm.
or no. It's binary. A lot of things within IVF are not. A lot of things are bad luck or question marks or confusing, but this is not confusing. This is yes or no, which
Mm.
I like. As a scientist, I like yes and no answers. And most of my
And also,
patients do.
Yeah, I was going to say, from a patient perspective, there's so much uncertainty and so many grey areas, aren't there? So much we don't understand. So having some clear, this is not male factor,
Yeah.
then, move on, or this is, and this is what we're going to do about it, is a really empowering approach, I think, to people's fertility journeys.
It's completely powerful. And we have a National Health Service which is very poorly funded in terms of fertility. There's very little that the NHS does for infertile couples. Their answer universally is usually IVF treatment. So if you're going to get one and only cycle from your national health, which will cost you somewhere between £5,000 and £10,000 to pay for privately, try and maximize everything from the very beginning. Just it's so logical. It's almost too logical. When couples come to see me, it's usually, sadly, Hannah, after they've failed already. So I see a
Mm,
lot of couples that miscarry, that have been infertile for many, many years. And I see a lot of couples that have had a failed IVF cycle. I've actually just seen a lovely couple this week, same thing, 2 years trying, failed IVF cycle, no bugs in the sperm, interestingly, but high DNA frag. We obviously worked with him, urology referral. We got the sperm DNA frag lower, and now his partner is pregnant. I've had 19 calls from this lovely couple because they can't quite believe it. But it is absolutely true. And it's happened 8 times in the last week for me. So it's
mm.
not an unusual
Amazing.
call for us. It's not an unusual call. Sorry.
So when somebody has got, let's say they find out that they have got high levels of DNA fragmentation damage, what are the reasons and what are the treatment approaches? So they go and see a urologist. What kind of happens next? Like, what can they do to improve their DNA?
Well, we can talk about lifestyle a little bit. I think we should, because that is
Yeah.
important. But overall, the urologist is so much more than just lifestyle. Lifestyle is important, don't get me wrong, for all of our health, for everything that we do, for our fertility as well. I always say to patients, actually, imagine our bodies just haven't changed in hundreds of thousands of years. We are the same. And yet we expect so many different things of our bodies. We expect to have children much older than we would have had than our parents or our grandparents or our great grandparents. We are sitting on around a lot. We don't move around as much as we used to. I mean, our bodies literally are designed for hunter gathering. They're designed for picking things, eating, sleeping for long periods, and then like running after things. They're not designed for doing what we're doing right now. So in those terms, we are living in a very sort of different way as we would have been. Well, I mean, evolutionary in a blink of an eye almost. So
Mm,
what can we do? Lifestyle is important, and I almost say to people, try and imagine you're living 500 years ago, because so when you're eating, try to eat things that are non-processed. We all know that nuts look like they do, fruit and veg looks like they do. Non-processed food is food that is much healthier for our bodies because it is what our are used to consuming. The reason that we love sugar so much is that, our ancestors would have come across a bush of berries and gorged themselves on the berries. But ultimately, we're gorging ourselves on the berries every day, all day, every day, a lot of the time. So, what we need to do is lower our sugar, lower our caffeine intake. We know that alcohol has an effect on sperm, and we know that caffeine has an effect on sperm as well. Obviously, cigarette smoking, whether it be marijuana and tobacco, is an absolute no. And the
mm,
data on vaping is not in, but I imagine it will be very similar because of the nicotine effects. So we're trying to live in a way that we would have been living historically, eating things that look like they would have. I mean, I always say patients, just imagine what it would have looked like on your plate if nobody did anything to it. Does it look close to what it would have looked like? That is a non-processed meal. So we know that not drinking, not smoking, eating in a non-processed way, taking regular multivitamins. I quite like Proxeed and Impril. There are other ones on the market as well, but Proxeed and Impril have the most data behind them, and they are. And Proxeed is quite nasty to taste, but to be honest with you, it's a very good multivitamin, and we do have very good results with that as well.
mm.
Also, cooling. I appreciate that there's lots of videos and there's lots of movies actually, even back to the 80s in my day, Hannah, when, people were talking about keeping their testicles cool, and it is important to do that. They hang outside of the body for a reason. Spermatogenesis, which, is sperm making, happens best at cool temperatures. It's pretty hard to do that these days. But if we can think about, boys, when you're sat down, just get up, maybe maneuver your testicles around so they're not underneath you, as it were. So
Mm,
they're not directly, you're not sitting on them like a chicken sitting on an egg. You're not trying to, heat your testicles up. Don't put the heated seat function on in your car. I love it. Don't do it. It's
mm,
just like cooking them. And also try to keep your laptop off your lap. All the things, but mostly move around. Don't wear tight clothing. We just did Celebrity Save Our Sperm on Channel 4, and one of the celebrities on there was wearing very tight clothing. And literally, just all he did was is keep his testicles cool and stop wearing those clothes. And lo and behold, improvements in sperm count and motility. Because testicles if you go to the V&A Museum and you have a look at underwear throughout the ages, we didn't wear underwear pretty much until probably the 1950s and 60s. And in the 50s, it was bloomers. But then along comes like Y fronts, and it becomes fashionable to keep your testicles all close to your body. Whereas our ancestors were not doing that. They weren't doing that. And that was quite an effective thing. I'm asked regularly the question of, is the male sperm count reducing? I
mm,
actually am quite worried, and I do think that it is. And I think for us, it's unusual these days to see a high sperm count in the lab. So I do think that obviously there are other factors here as well. We're having children later, but we're definitely living in a way that is not conducive to good sperm health, because your body works to keep your brain, liver, heart, and kidneys alive. It doesn't work to keep your testicles there. They're superstitious. Your body can think, well, it's always going to try and track the resources to the important organs to keep you alive. So we do find so many people get pregnant after just keeping testicles cool and eating properly and ditching the alcohol. I mean, there is another really important piece of information that I give all my patients, Hannah, and that is that we're really not having sex anymore.
mm.
I don't know what the average amount of sex is, but if I just took a poll on my patients, I'd say it's probably 1 to 2 times a month on average, maybe lower. There was that lovely comedian, wasn't there? I really like her. Her name Catherine Ryan. She's just the nicest, I really like her comedy. And she was saying that she had intercourse with her partner once a month, and there was outcry. And then suddenly on Instagram or whatever, there was like, "Oh yes, me too, me too, me
Mm,
too." Because our lives are so busy. They're so busy. We've got loads of things to watch on the TV, loads of things to do, phones the whole time. I have to say I'm terrible. I'm actually glued to my phone too much. But
me
we're
too.
not having well, that's right. And only 100 years ago, a lot of people didn't have light in their house. So it got to
Mm.
about 5 o'clock on a Sunday evening or in the evening. What else was there to do apart from have intercourse? There was not a lot else, was there? Maybe a
No.
bit of reading by candlelight or some some singing or whatever. But that's what we did. We had more intercourse. So I find that actually having more intercourse is a really effective piece of advice from us, because we know that a lot of couples are using the sticks where you pee on them and you track
Mm,
ovulation, but it's really hard to track ovulation. And those sticks are not very accurate either. A lot of the time people are having intercourse way outside of when they're actually fertile, because a woman can ovulate from day 7 to day 21 of her cycle usually. And that is, if you imagine that you start your period on a Monday, 7 days later is day 7. And so intercourse between day 7 and day 21 becomes really important, because you could ovulate at any time, and it takes those little sperm at least a day to get from vagina up to the fallopian tubes. They don't swim like you think they do. They don't
mm,
swim like massively. They're not Olympic 100 meters. They're more ocean swimmers. They're on marathons, essentially. They're trying to swim the Atlantic Ocean in glue while someone holds them back behind them. So it's really important to have more intercourse, because these sperms swim for a bit, then they hang out for a bit. Then they swim for a bit, then they hang out for a bit. I remember reading sperm wars when I was much younger. I'm not a great believer in that. I don't think, because if you imagine it, all those sperm have all got the same genes. Okay, they're all slightly different because of meiosis, but they've all got the same genetics. So they're actually, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that they behave quite cooperatively,
Mm.
wafting the others up, because they've all got the same motive, which is to get this genetic material up into the fallopian tube so that it can actually fertilize the egg. So please have more intercourse
The
between day
the
7 and 21.
the thing that I see a lot, and hear a lot is that, when a couple have been trying for quite a long time, they
Mm.
really go off all
Yeah,
sex
yeah,
anyway. It becomes really difficult. And what happens is that people then start having sex around the time that they think that they're ovulating only,
yeah,
because they can't bear doing it at any other point, because it's become so triggering and associated. It's like all the joy and pleasure has gone, and it becomes
yeah,
very kind of functional. And so what happens is that I see is that people have sex through their ovulation window and then they don't have any sex at all.
yeah.
And so we often talk about this idea of regular
Mm.
ejaculation through the
Yes.
cycle, whether you're having sex or not, because otherwise that sperm is not, it's just sitting there for a week, 2 weeks,
Well, that's
until
right.
you're ready to go again.
Exactly. And that's what we also know, is that fragmentation levels are higher in sperm where the sperm's been sitting in the testicles for long periods of time. For that reason, Hannah, exactly. Because sperm is not made, and I go back to sort of prehistoric us as well. I go back in time, and it's not made to be sort of sitting there for days and days on end. I mean, if you imagine a beautiful fillet steak, it definitely would be nicer the day that you bought it rather than 2 or 3 weeks later. And it's a protein at the end of the day. Sperm is made of protein. So the sperm usually are made in the testicles over a 90-day period. They work from the outside inside, and then they come up through the epididymis and gain motility. And if you leave them in the epididymis for long periods of time, they just, or they degrade. They die and they degrade. So then
Mm.
you have a higher sort of fragmentation levels in the sperm, and then you know that you've got a lower chance of pregnancy. But
So
yes, it
what
does
do you
happen
recommend? Sorry, what do you recommend in terms of how often should the man be ejaculating on a sort of what's a guideline?
every other day.
Every
Every
other
other
day,
day.
okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
but then don't feel guilty if you're not, because
Yeah.
it is stressful, all of this, and you are reading a lot. Dr. Google's not great when it comes to men's fertility. It's actually quite inaccurate. But just ejaculate more every other day is absolutely fine. And I suppose, give yourself a break as well. Give yourself a break. Everybody becomes a doctor in this situation. Your mum, your best friend, your sister, your work colleagues. Everybody asks you as well, "Oh, you're going to have a baby soon? Let's have a baby." I mean, I really think that that question should be outlawed. People should not be allowed to ask somebody else if they're having a baby. You don't ask how much you earn. You shouldn't be
Mm.
allowed to say, "Are you going to have a baby soon? Are you thinking about having a child?" Because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. I would I would have intercourse for a few months, just when you feel like it. Don't even track
Mm.
anything. Forget it for a bit. Have intercourse when you feel like it. Go to the cinema, go on holiday. Lots of pregnancies after holidays. Try and relax as much as you can, but make sure that you've just had some tests done, because I know that our GPs love to say wait for a year. I
Mm.
don't think we should be waiting for a year, because when that data came out, and when that original data came out to suggest that you should wait a year, we were having children a lot younger. So that data came out in the 1980s, when the average first child was 24. The woman was 24. The average age of the woman now is 30. That is a huge difference. So I actually think that get yourself some tests, get yourself some reassurance, uh, for the man and the woman, and then just sit back and relax for a bit, because then you'll know what's going on. You'll know potentially how fertile you are. You'll be given some really good guidance into how long to wait for, and how to go about doing this. So I would just say to people, try and just relax, ditch the sticks, stop peeing on them. They're inaccurate anyway. Get rid of every phone app that you have on your phone about fertility, please. There's no there's no evidence to suggest that any of this works. None.
Mm.
None of them are scientifically proven. And if you're having more intercourse, you don't need them. All this subscription and, everybody giving you advice. I would just have more intercourse, get the right testing done, speak to somebody who you trust. ideally a professional, and also get somebody who you emotionally trust in the background as well with your emotions, and just try and sort of talk to them about it, because all of this is very upsetting. And the
Mm. Um,
NHS, I mean, don't get me wrong, I admire our National Health Service if you've got a broken arm or you've just been diagnosed with cancer. But I'm afraid to say, if you have a fertility problem, it is very hit and miss as to the amount of care that you're actually going to receive. And you think that you should be receiving a very high level. I'd actually like the NHS to stop doing semen analysis, Hannah, I'll be honest with you. Not because I want loads of semen analysis people, and at the moment our clinic is at capacity most weeks at the moment. But I just think that you just need to take it far more seriously. Did you know that the
mm,
budget on the NHS for a semen analysis is 50 pence? 50 pence.
wow.
Now, when you're paying 50 pence for something, it can't be a high quality. You see, semen analysis on the NHS and private is there and there. Hang on,
Mm,
I don't get it in the screen, because there is so much difference between it. A lot of the time, a pathology clinic will just be doing very basic tests with somebody who's not very experienced. And sometimes, more often than not, getting it wrong or reporting it in a way that GPs can't read. So we get a lot of GPs come to us and say, "Well, is this normal or not?" And I'll look and I'll see that they've actually just listed the reference ranges rather than the actual ranges, or that it's said in really small print at the bottom, azoospermic, which means there's no sperm in the ejaculate. So we see, I mean, our clinic is for absolutely everybody. I don't care if you have a test with me. I don't care if you spend any money with me. I couldn't care less. Just bring me your test wherever it's been done. Bring me all of your history wherever it's been done, and we will review it and we will discuss it with you. And we will help you to move things forward. Because the other thing that we need to do is we need to bridge the massive gap between NHS and private.
mm,
NHS is here, private is here. Most people can't afford a £300 consultation. Most people can't afford a £300 anything in this day and age at the moment. So we are not so we are doing that. We are bridging the gap between those two things. So we do consultations for £50, something like that.
yeah.
And to
Which,
cover, something we charge to make sure people turn up. Because when
yeah,
I wasn't charging, I was literally sat there sometimes with people not turning up, which drove me, well, it's disappointing to say the least.
yeah.
So now we do charge to make sure people attend the
Do you,
conversation.
so do you think that people should, like, in terms of waiting to test, like, how long have you got any, like, as soon, I'm kind of the opinion, as soon
Now,
as,
yeah.
like, why, if you
Well,
know you want to try, just test.
yeah, we're seeing so many more patients now in the last 5 years that are testing before they've even
Yeah,
thinking about having a baby, maybe just before they get married, maybe when they know that this is a relationship they want to stay in, after you bought a house or you've been together for a few years. Why not? Better to
yeah,
know now.
yeah,
I'm not a great believer in, if you've got a lump, just hope the damn thing goes away. I think, a stitch in time saves nine. Get yourself somewhere. If you have no sperm, yes, it's not nice, but there's so much that can be done. And in our clinic, a majority of people with no sperm still end up with a baby, a genetic child of their own, because you're able to do so much more in 2024 than you could even, well, from a male perspective. I mean, people like Jonathan Ramsey, Jazz Kelsey, people like that are changing things, because there's so much that you can do if you see the right people. But good urologists, I think urologists that really specialize in fertility, they are still a bit like hen's teeth. So, I
mm,
mean, there's probably under 30 individuals in this country that really specialize at men's fertility only at a high level, which is not many when you consider there's probably over sort of 40, 50,000 gynecologists.
yeah, it's
So
crazy, isn't it?
that, yeah, that is an issue. And Mr. Ramsey is addressing things like that, Mr. Kelsey, by training other people. But I think just get tested. Just get
Yeah,
tested, and then you'll know, and then you can do something about it or nothing about it. But then it's down to you to decide those things. Because a lot of
yeah,
women, we're seeing quite a few women freeze their eggs and everything now as well, to preserve their fertility for later in life. And I think egg freezing has got better. The sooner you do it, though, the better, because we know that when you're under 30, you have a better chance of the egg surviving. So I
mm,
don't. I think that just knowing these things is powerful. And women do tend to test their fertility far more than men. I do
Mm.
find that sometimes I don't want to stereotype men, obviously, because or men of my generation, I might actually stereotype because men of my generation don't want to know if it's them or not. But I am seeing so many more now younger men, sort of 30, 25 to 40, that are saying, look, I'm going to get this tested because I know that so much can be done about it.
Yeah.
And I can understand not getting tested in biblical times because there's nothing you can do. If you have no sperm, that is what's going to happen to you. That is your fate. But in 2024, if you've got no sperm, we can do so much. You can make
Yeah.
sperm. You can make the testicles make sperm. You can improve it. You can have an operation. You can have an assessment. There's so much that can be done. But that to bury your head in the sand is crazy. And of course, what happens while you're burying your head in the sand is that your partner is getting older. So if you have somebody who's 30 and then they're 35, then you wait another 5 years till they're 40. By that time, you've gone from having a really good chance of having your family complete to a not so great chance of having a family complete. Because I also think that the biggest mistake that fertility clinics make is that they think about IVF in terms of a baby rather than
Mm.
a family. Now, they think of it as we'll get you pregnant with one baby, you'll have one baby. But most people in this country or otherwise want more than one child. There are very few people that really genuinely just want one. So I think that we need to think about things in terms of how do we get people family complete? And how
Yeah.
you do that is you make that sperm lovely quality. If you're having an IVF cycle and you've got blocked fallopian tubes, you make that sperm lovely quality. You make lots of embryos so that you can have some embryos put back into your body and some stored for later on in your life so you don't have to pay to have IVF treatment again. And I think that's what we need to be thinking. Rather than thinking about one child, we need to really be thinking about family complete. And they've done that for years, IVF clinics have, by getting lots of eggs through stimulation. But they also need to make sure that that sperm is good quality. So we get more good quality embryos and we can freeze them and they're normal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's about investigating, testing, and finding out as much information as possible so you can make informed choices about what your future is going to be like. You don't want to be sitting in my clinic or your clinic,
No.
10 years down the line, 8 years down the line, wishing that you'd done something sooner, because that's the reality of people that we see. It's heartbreaking. And also it makes me really cross a lot of the time when people have been through failed treatments, or they've been told it's not a male factor issue without proper investigation and thought into the male side of things. It's not right.
But the people that are going to change this isn't me. It's you and your listeners. It isn't me. I can bang on about this until I'm blue in the face. I look like somebody who's trying to sell a load of sperm tests, but I'm
Mm,
not. I've no
mm,
desire to sell a load of sperm tests. I desire to achieve what I wasn't achieving when I was an embryologist. I was not achieving a very, okay, I worked for some amazing clinics with amazing people. But the reality is that we tell more people that they're not going to be parents than we tell that they're going to be parents. And for me, that's soul destroying and also not good science, not good
mm.
science from the beginning. So I know it's scary. I know that you're probably, when you're listening to this, you're thinking, what am I going to do now? Pick up the phone, make an appointment, or make an appointment with somebody just to help you and move things forward. Consider that, yes, you're young or you have some time. You probably do have time, but just make just that little step. I always think that, I don't know about you, but I don't really like too much Sunday lunch on my plate. I mean, I really, even my mum's Sunday lunch, I'm like, oh. But if I just have a little bit and then a little bit more, and that's how you should approach fertility.
Mm,
A little bit more, then a little bit more. Because any journey is scary if you think about the entire picture of it. Having
yeah,
children is exactly
yeah,
like that, really, isn't it? You can't think about them at 18 when they're one. But
yeah,
take it one step at a time, but just do something. Even if it's just Google, if it's just go on to, I mean, our website's fertilitysolutions.co.uk, but, just read about it and yeah, just make some action. Any action is
yeah.
better than no action.
Absolutely. So what I'll do, Claire, is I'll put all your details obviously on the notes at the end so people can link through and have a look. And also, I would say refer back to the other episode that we've done with Claire, which we go into the DNA testing and the sperm culture test in a bit more detail if you want to find out about that. So that's all there to listen to. So as always, Claire, thank you very much for your time. It's really
Well,
appreciated and very helpful as always.
thank you, Hannah. And thank you for doing such an amazing job that you are. I'm not surprised that your podcast has been nominated for an amazing award. It is so important that we do these things, that we talk, that we move things forward, that we are bold in the way that we behave, because we're not here forever. Life is short. And at the end of
Yeah.
the day, I appreciate that, all these conversations are embarrassing, but we will do our best to make them non-embarrassing. Hopefully
Yeah.
you'll agree when you speak to us.
Yes. Okay, thank you very much. And thanks everybody for listening. As always, we hope that you have found that helpful, and all the details are in the show notes. See you next time.
See ya.
We saving? Stopped. I always get the fear that if you've enjoyed listening to this and want to find out more, then come and join my free community in Facebook. We have loads of resources. You can catch up on all our previous webinars and be the first to know about forthcoming events. To sign up, just follow the link in the show notes. And if you'd like to work one-to-one with myself or one of the team, then please see our website, hannahpern.com, where you can book in directly or organise a discovery call to find out how we can support your fertility and your reproductive health.